The stagecoach had left Sarah Mitchell at the edge of Tucson 3 days ago, and still she sat in the boarding house staring at the letter that had traveled 2,000 miles to find her in St. Louis. The year was 1882, and the Arizona Territory was no place for a woman alone, especially one carrying the weight of secrets that should have been buried 5 years ago. Through the warped glass window, she watched Apache riders pass through the dusty main street, their presence causing the townspeople to scatter like startled quail. One rider sat taller than the others, his bearing proud despite the Army's attempts to force his people onto reservations. When his dark eyes swept across the boarding house windows, Sarah drew back into the shadows, her heart pounding. The letter crackled as she unfolded it again. The paper was worn thin from her constant handling during the long journey west. Written in the careful script of someone educated at the mission schools, it read simply, "Miss Mitchell, my sister's spirit walks unquiet. Come to White River Canyon. The truth must be spoken before the snows come. Michael Yazzie, Anna's brother." Little Michael, who'd been barely 14 when Sarah had known him, always following his older sister like a devoted shadow. Anna Yazzie had been the only friend Sarah had found when her father dragged her to the territory to open his trading post. Anna, who'd spoken perfect English and Spanish alongside Apache and Navajo, who'd laughed at Sarah's fear of scorpions and taught her to read the desert's moods. Anna, who'd died because Sarah had been too much of a coward to speak the truth about Thomas Brennan. A knock at her door made her stomach lurch. The boarding house proprietress, Mrs. Garrett, peered in with suspicious eyes. "You got a visitor, Miss Mitchell, an Apache. I told him we don't allow their kind inside, but he says he'll wait in the stable." Sarah stood on shaking legs, smoothing her traveled-stained dress. "Thank you, Mrs. Garrett." The stable smelled of hay and horse sweat, familiar scents that reminded her of better times. Michael Yazzie stood near the back stalls, no longer the boy she remembered. 5 years had transformed him into a warrior, tall, broad-shouldered, his hair long and bound with leather. He wore a mix of traditional dress and white man's clothing, leather leggings with a cotton shirt, a Winchester rifle slung across his back. "You came," he said simply. His voice was deeper now, carrying the authority of someone who'd seen too much too young. "Your letter. How did you find me?" "The trader networks. My grandmother has friends among the Comancheros. They knew your father had returned east, knew where his family settled." He studied her face. "You look thin. The years have not been kind." Sarah felt tears threaten. "The years have been what I deserved." "No." Michael stepped closer, and she could see Anna in the set of his jaw, the intensity of his gaze. "What you deserve is a chance to make things right. What my family deserves is justice. Thomas Brennan is back." The name hit her like a physical blow. "That's impossible. He left for California after he killed my sister and blamed it on a drunken Apache raid? Yes, but his father's silver mine is played out in California. He's returned to claim the land grants he bought with blood money, land that includes White River Canyon, sacred Apache land." Sarah sank onto a hay bale, her legs unable to hold her. Through the stable doors, she could see the desert stretching endlessly, the same desert that had swallowed Anna's truth 5 years ago. "He's built himself a ranch," Michael continued. "Hired gunman, calls himself a colonel now, though he never served. The Army protects him because he promises to help clear out the Apache problem. My people are being forced from lands we've held for generations, and the man who started it all with my sister's murder stands to profit from it. Michael, even if I speak now, who would believe me? It's been 5 years. Thomas has money, influence. He has enemies, too." Michael reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a leather-wrapped bundle. "There's a federal judge coming to Tucson, Judge Samuel Harrison from back east. He has no love for men who build fortunes on lies. My grandmother has been gathering evidence, testimonies, but we need you, Sarah. You were there that night." The bundle contained items that made Sarah's breath catch. Anna's silver cross necklace, the one she'd worn the night she died. A photograph, one of the few that existed, showing Anna in her mission school dress, smiling. And something else, something that made Sarah's blood run cold. Pages torn from Thomas Brennan's own journal, obtained somehow by the Apache scouts who worked both sides of the conflict. "Read it," Michael said quietly. Thomas's handwriting was unmistakable, that bold scrawl she'd once thought so sophisticated. The Apache girl knew too much about Father's dealings with the Confederate gold. Should have kept her mouth shut about what she overheard at the trading post. At least her death served a purpose. Nobody questions an Apache raid. Sarah won't talk. She's too frightened of what I'll do to her family. Sarah's hands shook. Confederate gold? Hidden somewhere in the territory. My sister discovered Thomas's father was part of the group that stole it. She was going to report it to the federal authorities. That's why she died. Not because Thomas was drunk and angry about her interfering with his pursuit of you. Though that's what you thought, wasn't it? The truth was more terrible than Sarah had imagined. She'd spent 5 years believing Anna had died defending her from Thomas's unwanted advances. The real reason was even darker. Anna had died because she'd tried to stop a larger evil. The journey to White River Canyon took 2 days by horseback. Michael had brought a gentle mare for Sarah, though she hadn't ridden in years. They traveled at dawn and dusk, avoiding the army patrols that might ask questions about a white woman traveling with an Apache warrior. On the morning of the second day, they created a rise, and Sarah saw the Apache camp spread below. Not the savage encampment the newspapers described, but an organized community of wickiups and cook fires, children playing, women working hides, men tending horses. It looked achingly peaceful, though she noticed armed scouts positioned on the surrounding ridges. An elderly woman emerged from the largest wickiup as they approached. Maria Yazzie, Anna's grandmother, moved with the dignity of someone who'd survived everything the desert and white men could throw at her. Her face was a map of deep lines, but her eyes remained sharp as obsidian arrowheads. "So," Maria said in accented English, "the frightened rabbit has become brave enough to return." Sarah dismounted, her legs unsteady. "Mrs. Yazzie, Maria raised one hand. "No apologies. They change nothing. Come. We eat. Then you tell me how my granddaughter really died." The wickiup smelled of smoke and sage, bringing back memories of times Anna had brought her here, teaching her which plants healed and which plants harmed. Maria served a simple meal of venison stew and acorn bread, while others gathered, Apache warriors and their families, but also, surprisingly, 2 white women and a Mexican trader. "These also have grievances against Thomas Brennan," Maria explained. "Mrs. Catherine Walsh, whose husband was murdered when he refused to sell his water rights. Mrs. Elizabeth Coleman, whose daughter disappeared after catching Brennan's eye. And Senor Gutierrez, who lost his freight business after refusing to transport stolen guns." Sarah looked at their faces, seeing her own pain reflected back. She wasn't alone in this. Thomas had left a trail of victims across the territory. "Tell us," Maria commanded. "From the beginning." Sarah closed her eyes, transporting herself back to that night in 1877. "There was a dance at Fort Lowell. Thomas had been courting me for months, though courting isn't the right word. Pursuing, hunting. My father owed money to his father, so I couldn't refuse his attention." She paused, gathering strength. "Anna came to the dance as a translator for the Apache delegation trying to negotiate water rights. She saw the bruises on my arms where Thomas had grabbed me the week before. She confronted him quietly, trying to convince him to leave me alone." The wickiup had fallen silent except for the crackling fire. Thomas was drunk on whiskey and anger. He'd just learned something had gone wrong with his father's business. I know now it was about the Confederate gold. He told Anna to mind her place, called her things I won't repeat. Anna stood her ground. She said she knew about his father's theft, about the murders they'd covered up. She said she had proof. Michael leaned forward. "What proof?" "Letters." Anna had been teaching Thomas's father's Mexican servants to read and write. One of them, Rosa, had copied letters about the gold, about killing anyone who discovered it. Anna had those letters with her that night. Maria's weathered hands clenched. Continue. Thomas grabbed Anna, tried to take her reticule with the letters. They struggled. We were near the canyon edge. There was an old Apache moon ceremony site there, before the army claimed it. Anna was strong, she fought back. But Thomas, he had a knife. A small one, hidden. He stabbed her in the side, not deep enough to kill immediately, but enough to weaken her. Sarah's voice broke. Catherine Walsh reached over, took her hand. Anna fell to her knees at the canyon edge. Thomas took the letters from her bag. She looked at me, begged me with her eyes to help her, to tell the truth. But Thomas had his pistol out by then. He said if I moved, if I ever spoke about this, he'd kill my entire family. Make it look like an Apache raid, just like he was about to do with Anna. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. He kicked her. She was already bleeding, already weak, and he kicked her over the edge. Then he fired his pistol in the air, started screaming about an Apache attack. When the soldiers came running, he had already cut himself with his own knife, made it look like he'd fought to save her. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Maria spoke in Apache to Michael, who translated. She asks if you would swear to this before the federal judge. Yes, Sarah said without hesitation. I should have done it 5 years ago. Michael stood. Judge Harrison arrives in Tucson in 3 days. But Thomas Brennan has learned you're here. His men have been watching the roads. Let them come, one of the Apache warriors said. We're ready for a fight. No, Maria said sharply. No more blood. We do this the white man's way, through their law. If we fight, they call us savages, and everything my granddaughter died for means nothing. Elizabeth Coleman spoke up, her voice trembling but determined. My husband's a lawyer in Tombstone. He's been gathering evidence against the Brennans for 2 years. If we can get Sarah safely to Tucson, if she testifies, we might have a chance. It won't be easy, Senor Gutierrez warned. Brennan has hired the Watson gang, 20 men, all killers. Michael looked at Sarah. Are you prepared for this? Once you testify, there's no going back. Thomas will try to kill you. Sarah thought of Anna's face that night, the betrayal in her eyes as she fell. I've been dead for 5 years anyway. At least this way my death might mean something. They left before dawn. A strange procession. Apache warriors, wrong settlers, a Mexican trader, and Sarah Mitchell, riding toward either justice or death. Michael had chosen a route through the mountains, longer but less likely to be watched by Brennan's men. On the second night, camped in a box canyon with red walls that seemed to hold the day's heat, Sarah sat with Maria by the fire. The old woman was teaching her to grind mesquite pods, the repetitive motion oddly soothing. Anna spoke of you often, Maria said suddenly. Said you had a good heart but weak spine, like a young aspen tree, bending too much in the wind. She was right. Trees can grow stronger. Sometimes they need storms to learn to stand firm. Maria added dried herbs to the grinding stone. My granddaughter saw something in you worth saving. That's why she confronted Brennan that night. Before Sarah could respond, one of the scouts rode in hard, his horse lathered with sweat. He spoke rapidly in Apache to Michael, who cursed, the first time Sarah had heard him do so. Brennan's men found our trail. They're maybe 3 hours behind us. The camp erupted into controlled activity. Weapons were checked, horses saddled, plans made. Michael pulled Sarah aside. There's an old Spanish mission 10 miles north. Abandoned, but the walls are strong. We make our stand there. A stand? Sarah's mouth went dry. Michael, I don't know how to fight. You don't need to fight with guns. Your weapon is truth. But first, we need to live long enough for you to use it. They rode through the night, pushing the horses hard. The mission appeared at dawn like a mirage. Adobe walls crumbling but still standing. A bell tower, with the bell long stolen. empty windows like dead eyes. But it was defensible. As they prepared their positions, Catherine Walsh worked beside Sarah, loading rifles with surprising efficiency. "My husband taught me to shoot after the first time Brennan's men came around. Said a woman in the territory needed to know how to protect herself." "I never learned," Sarah admitted. "Then you'll learn today." The attack came at noon, when the sun was directly overhead and shadows provided no cover. 20 riders appeared on the horizon, dust devils announcing their approach. Thomas Brennan rode at their center, still handsome in that cruel way, wearing a black coat despite the heat. He stopped just outside rifle range, used a speaking trumpet to call out, "Sarah Mitchell, I know you're in there. Come out and I'll make it quick. Stay and everyone dies badly." Michael answered with a rifle shot that kicked up dust at Brennan's horse's feet. The horse reared, nearly throwing him. "You always were a poor shot, boy," Brennan called, "just like your sister was poor at minding her own business." The rage that filled Sarah was unlike anything she'd ever felt. Before anyone could stop her, she was at the wall, screaming, "She was worth 100 of you. She died trying to stop you from stealing, from killing, and everyone will know it." Brennan's laugh echoed across the desert. "Dead women tell no tales, Sarah. You should have stayed in St. Louis." The first attack was probing, testing their defenses. The Apache warriors were excellent shots, making Brennan's men pay for every advance. But ammunition was limited, and everyone knew this was just the beginning. As the sun began to sink, painting the desert blood red, Señor Gutierrez pointed to the horizon. "Riders coming, many riders." Sarah's heart sank. Reinforcements for Brennan. But Michael was smiling, a fierce expression that transformed his face. "Not his men. Look closer." The riders wore army blue, and at their head rode a man in the black suit of a federal judge. Judge Harrison had come to them, accompanied by a full cavalry troop. Brennan's men scattered like coyotes before wolves, but Thomas himself stood his ground, that arrogant smile still in place. "Judge Harrison," he called, "these savages have kidnapped a white woman. I was attempting a rescue." The judge, a stern man with gray whiskers and tired eyes, dismounted slowly. "Mr. Brennan, I have a federal warrant for your arrest on charges of murder, theft of government property, and conspiracy." "This is ridiculous. You have no proof." "I have all the proof I need." The judge turned to Sarah. "Miss Mitchell, I received your deposition from Mr. Coleman, along with supporting evidence. Will you testify in open court?" Sarah stepped forward, past Michael, past Maria, until she stood in the dying light where Thomas could see her clearly. "I will testify. I will tell everyone how you murdered Anna Yazzie to cover your father's theft of Confederate gold. I will tell them about the knife, the kick, the way you laughed as she fell." For the first time in 5 years, she saw fear in Thomas Brennan's eyes. The courthouse in Tucson was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread through the territory like wildfire. Thomas Brennan, son of wealth and privilege, was being tried for murdering an Apache woman. The year 1882 had seen many trials in the territory, but none like this. Sarah sat in the witness chair, her hands folded calmly in her lap, though her heart raced. She wore a simple gray dress that Maria had helped her choose. Respectable but not ostentatious. In the gallery she could see the mix of faces. Apache, Mexican, white settlers, all united in their desire for justice. Thomas sat at the defendant's table, his expensive lawyer beside him. He'd tried to catch her eye several times, attempting to intimidate her with his stare, but Sarah kept her gaze on Judge Harrison. "Miss Mitchell," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court about the night of September 15, 1877. Sarah spoke for 2 hours, detailing everything. The courtroom was silent except for her voice and the scratch of the court reporter's pen. She told them about Anna's strength, her intelligence, her discovery of the Confederate gold conspiracy. She described Thomas's escalating violence, the confrontation, The murder. When she finished, Thomas's lawyer rose for cross-examination. Miss Mitchell, you claim to have witnessed this alleged murder, yet you said nothing for 5 years. Why should we believe you now? Because I was a coward then, Sarah said simply. I was 19, alone, and terrified. Thomas Brennan had threatened to kill my family. I believed him. I'd seen what he was capable of. Or perhaps you're lying now, seeking attention or revenge for being spurned. I have Anna's blood on my conscience, Sarah interrupted. I need neither attention nor revenge. I need only to tell the truth I should have told 5 years ago. The lawyer changed tactics. You're aware that Apache testimony is not typically admitted in territorial courts? Which is why Anna can't speak for herself, Sarah shot back. But I can speak for her. I was there. I saw everything. Other witnesses followed. Senor Gutierrez testified about the stolen guns and threatened freight lines. Catherine Walsh spoke about her husband's murder after refusing to sell water rights. Elizabeth Coleman wept as she described her daughter's disappearance. Then came the surprise witness, Rosa Hernandez, the Mexican servant who had copied the incriminating letters. She'd been in hiding for 5 years, protected by the Apache who'd helped her escape after Anna's death. I saw Senor Brennan burn the original letters, Rosa testified through a translator. But I had made copies, hidden them. Anna Yazzie was teaching me to write. She said education was freedom. She died for those letters, for the truth they contained. Rosa produced the copies, damning evidence of the Confederate gold theft, of murders committed to keep it secret, of Thomas's role in the conspiracy. On the trial's 3rd day, Michael Yazzie was called to testify. As an Apache, his testimony was legally questionable, but Judge Harrison allowed it. Anna was my sister, Michael said, his voice carrying through the packed courtroom. She was 22 years old. She spoke 5 languages. She taught children to read at the mission school. She was engaged to marry David Birdsong, a good man who still mourns her. She was not just an Apache girl, as Mr. Brennan calls her. She was a person, full of life and purpose, and he took that from her because she stood in the way of his greed. Thomas's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. The human face of Anna Yazzie had been presented to the court. Finally, Thomas himself took the stand, maintaining his innocence, claiming it had been self-defense against a savage attack. But under cross-examination, his story crumbled. He couldn't explain the Confederate gold evidence, couldn't account for the witnesses who'd seen him threaten Anna before that night, couldn't justify why he'd never reported the alleged Apache attack through proper channels. You built your fortune on blood and lies, the prosecutor concluded, and now justice has finally caught up with you. The jury, 12 men, all white, which had worried Sarah, deliberated for only 3 hours. Guilty of murder in the 1st degree. The courtroom erupted. Maria Yazzie sat silently, tears streaming down her weathered face. Michael placed a hand on his grandmother's shoulder, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. Judge Harrison sentenced Thomas Brennan to hang. The execution was set for a month hence, but Sarah didn't stay to watch. She'd done what she came to do. The truth had been told. Justice served. Instead, she rode with Michael and Maria back to White River Canyon, to the place where Anna had died. They held a ceremony there, something private and sacred that Sarah, despite her participation, knew she could never fully understand. Maria sang in Apache, her voice carrying across the canyon like wind through the rocks. Michael placed items at the canyon's edge, Anna's photograph, her silver cross, a book of poetry she'd loved. In our tradition, Michael explained, a spirit cannot rest if their death goes unavenged. Not revenge through blood, but through truth. Anna can rest now. Sarah knelt at the canyon's edge, no longer afraid of the height. I'm sorry I took so long, she whispered to the wind. I'm sorry I wasn't brave like you. Maria's hand settled on her shoulder. You are brave now. That is enough. They stayed at the Apache camp for a week. Sarah helped with daily tasks, grinding corn, tending children, learning the rhythms of a life she'd only glimpsed before. The Apache were preparing to move to the reservation, forced by the government despite having proved their truth in court. "This is the real injustice," Michael said one evening. "We helped convict a white man for murdering one of our own, and still they drive us from our land." "Where will you go?" "San Carlos Reservation. It's not our ancestral land, but we'll survive. We always do." He paused. "What about you?" Sarah had been wondering the same thing. She couldn't return to St. Louis. That life felt like it belonged to someone else. But she didn't belong here either, among the Apache who'd shown her such grace despite her failures. Catherine Walsh provided the answer, arriving at the camp with a proposal. "There's a school opening in Tombstone for Apache and Mexican children. They need teachers, someone who understands both worlds." Sarah looked at Maria, who nodded slowly. Anna would like that. Education was her weapon against injustice. 3 years passed. Sarah's schoolhouse in Tombstone had grown from 12 students to 40. Apache, Mexican, Chinese, and even some white children whose parents couldn't afford the regular school. She taught them to read and write in English, but also taught them pride in their own languages, their own stories. Michael visited when he could, bringing news from San Carlos. The conditions were harsh, the promises broken, but the Apache endured. He'd married now, had a son he'd named David after Anna's lost fiancé. "You look well," he told Sarah during one visit. "The desert suits you." She'd grown brown from the sun, strong from the work. The frightened girl who'd stood by while Anna died was gone, replaced by a woman who faced each day with purpose. "I received a letter," Sarah said, pulling an envelope from her desk. "From Judge Harrison. He's pushing for federal protection of Apache water rights, using the Brennan trial as precedent. He says Anna's death might save lives, ensure your people aren't completely destroyed." Michael's smile was bittersweet. She would have liked that, her death meaning something larger. That evening they walked to the small cemetery where Sarah had placed a marker for Anna. Not her body, which had been buried according to Apache tradition, but a memorial for those who needed a place to remember. The inscription read, "Anna Yazzie, 1855 to 1877, teacher, truth-teller, friend." Others had left offerings, flowers, stones, small tokens. Anna's story had spread, becoming something larger than just one woman's death. She'd become a symbol of resistance against those who would build empires on the bones of the innocent. "I dream about her sometimes," Sarah admitted. "Not the night she died, not anymore. I dream about her laughing, teaching, living, like she's showing me who she really was, not just how she ended." "That's not a dream," Michael said. "That's her spirit, teaching still." As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Sarah understood that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about remembering, about refusing to let the powerful erase the powerless from history. A young Apache girl ran up to them, one of Sarah's students. "Miss Mitchell, will you tell us the story again? About the brave woman who stood up to the bad man?" Sarah smiled, taking the child's hand. "Yes, Mary, I'll tell you about Anna Yazzie. I'll tell you as many times as you need to hear it." They walked back toward the town, 3 figures against the vast desert. A white woman who'd found her courage too late, but not too late to matter. An Apache warrior who'd chosen justice over vengeance. And a child who would grow up knowing that truth, however delayed, was worth fighting for. Behind them, the wind through the canyon sounded almost like a woman's voice, strong and clear, finally at peace. The letter Sarah had started writing that morning still lay on her desk, addressed to a newspaper back east. "To whom it may concern, I write to you about a woman named Anna Yazzie, whose story deserves to be known beyond the borders of the Arizona Territory. She died for truth, And though it took 5 years for justice to find her killer, her legacy lives on in every child who learns to read, every woman who finds her voice, every person who chooses truth over comfortable silence. The story would spread, as stories do, carried on the wind like desert sage. And somewhere, in the space between earth and sky where the Apache believed spirits dwelt, Anna Yazzie was finally free. The schoolhouse had become a school building, 2 stories of adobe and wood. Sarah Mitchell, now 42 with silver threading through her brown hair, watched her students perform a play they'd written about Arizona's history. Mary, the Apache girl who'd asked for Anna's story years ago, was now 17 and heading to a teacher's college back east, the first from the reservation to do so. Michael had become a tribal judge, working within the white man's system to protect what remained of Apache rights. His son David grew strong and smart, carrying both his people's traditions and the education Anna had died believing in. Thomas Brennan's name had become synonymous with the corruption of the territory's early days. His father's stolen Confederate gold had been recovered and used to fund schools for indigenous children. An irony Anna would have appreciated. But most importantly, Anna Yazzie's name lived on, not as a victim, but as a woman who'd stood against injustice, whose death had ultimately brought down those who thought themselves untouchable. Sarah kept a photograph on her desk, not of Anna alone, but of the 2 of them together, taken weeks before that fatal night. 2 young women, different worlds, united in friendship. Below it, she kept a simple card with words Michael had taught her in Apache, words that translated roughly to, "Truth is a river that cannot be dammed forever." Every morning before her students arrived, Sarah would touch that photograph and make the same promise. "I remember. I teach. I ensure you didn't die for nothing." And in the desert wind that swept through the open windows, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of rain, there was always an answer, wordless but clear, a presence that said, "I know. I forgive. Live well." The past no longer held her hostage. It had become her purpose, her strength, her way forward. Justice had been served not in the hanging of one man, but in the living testimony of those who refused to let the truth die. In the end, that was Anna Yazzie's greatest victory. Not that her killer was punished, but that her story inspired others to stand up, speak out, and choose truth over silence, no matter how many years had passed. The desert remembered everything, and now, finally, it remembered Anna correctly. Not as a victim, but as a warrior who'd won her final battle through the courage of others, through a friend who'd finally found her voice, through a brother who'd never given up, through a grandmother whose faith in justice never wavered. "Our family deserves justice," Michael had said. They had received it, not just in a courtroom, but in every child who learned to read in Sarah's school, in every woman who found the courage to speak truth to power, in every person who chose to remember that the powerful could be brought down by the truth, no matter how long that truth took to surface. The story ended where it began, in the desert, under an endless sky, with the knowledge that some things are worth fighting for, even if the fight takes years, even if it costs everything, even if you're just one voice against the wind. But sometimes one voice is enough to start an avalanche of truth. And Anna Yazzie's voice, carried now by dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, would echo through the canyons and across the years, a testament to the power of justice delayed but not denied.